Fantasy Sports Podcast, brought to you as always by the GSMC Sports Network, as we get a comment right off the jump from Andre. Is Kenneth Walker playing? And as a Seattle fan, you would think I knew the answer a little bit more to this question, Andre, but I actually don't know. In terms of what I hear from practice, he was a limited participant with that hand injury, so we'll see. I think that if he does play, I think he might have a limit on how many touches he gets, and that could be to the detriment of the Seattle offense. But for now, it's kind of up in the air. We still don't know how Mike McDonald presents injuries. Don't know if he's kind of like a game time decision kind of guy, or if he'll let us know in advance whether or not certain players are playing. But that is a fantastic question. I wish I had the answer for you right now, but let's just say it's up in the air. I'm kind of leaning towards no, even though he is limited in practice and could have a bigger role in tomorrow's practice. We'll see. So I think we'll have to take it by ear, and it will be a game time decision, which is kind of unfortunate if you're a fantasy football manager and you're waiting for a response. Thank you for this question because it's a good one, and one that I wanted to point out in this next segment. Injury updates, because we have a lot to go through and a short amount of time to do it in, unfortunately. Let's start off actually with some good news. We did get that breaking news. Don't know if you were watching or not, but if you weren't, Raheem Mostert is a long shot to play in that game against Seattle. I believe it is with a chest injury sustained against the Bills. And we'll have to see how that injury plays out for the Miami Dolphins, who can't afford many in this future for them. But let's start off with some good news. And this is especially good news if you're a Vikings fan, especially good news if you're a fantasy football manager of Justin Jefferson. I was talking about kind of a woeful situation there for Minnesota for this game, but Justin Jefferson seems like he's going to play in this game, because in a press conference after practice today, he said yes, for sure, when asked about playing in this game. So that should excite a lot of people. We'll see how the leg injury holds up. He himself said it felt good during practice, so a lot of excitement and hype around that. Fantastic news for Vikings fans, fantasy football managers everywhere about Justin Jefferson. But let's get to the ugly news. And the ugly news isn't necessarily about, just one player. It's about whole teams right now, especially the two teams that we talked about in the last segment, the 49ers and the Rams. Let's start off with the 49ers, who are projecting to have even worse news right now. We know about McCaffrey. He's missed the first two games and could miss at least the next three on the IR. We know about Deebo Samuel, also on the IR, could miss at least 6 weeks with a calf injury. But now we also know that George Kittle and Charvarius Ward on the defense, who also could potentially lose Nick Bosa for this game after he went down in that game against Minnesota, were limited participants in today's practice. As Shabizi Sweet Spot says, K9 is considered doubtful, so that's not necessarily a good projection if you're a fantasy football owner for him. But thank you for that information. It makes it a little bit more easy to determine who you want to choose for your squad in this game. But definitely don't choose anyone outside of Jordan Mason in the 49ers backfield, because that situation is scary. But going back to the Kittle and Ward injury, I don't necessarily have that much information about the limited injuries in practice, but it certainly seems like both of those players are still sore. And for Kittle, I think he could potentially be the more likely to be out, because Charvarius Ward seems like he's just sore and he's working out some kinks in practice. So it's definitely projecting to be a little bit more positive news for the 49ers defense. But in terms of the 49ers offense, if you're looking for contingency plans, yes, as Andre said, Niners got blessed with no injuries last year. Now the injury bug has smacked them. Hate to see it. Yes, I understand. As a Seattle fan, I kind of am, secretly, happy, not necessarily happy about it, because I'm never happy about injuries, but deep down in the inside, I feel a little bit, like it's bound to happen sometime. But, it is kind of sad to see such a talented team who, when they're all on the field, can make magic happen, kind of crumble to pieces in front of our eyes. And so it's going to be a weird game, man. It's going to be a weird game, 49ers-Rams, because we're not seeing any of our favorite players. So let's transition to the Rams here. Let's transition very quickly to them. Cooper Kupp. This is a very weird situation. The good news is he's not going to need a procedure on his ankle. That's the good news. The interesting news is that he's not placed on the IR, but it could be more about the fact that the Rams already have so many players on the IR that he's not. So it's not a timeline question, really. It's just the fact of the matter is the Rams are one of the most injured teams in the NFL right now, and they simply have no space to put him on the IR even if they wanted to. With that being said, it does look like a pretty serious injury, so expect a 6 to 8 week timeline there. And then for Puka Nacua, we already know about him, already on the IR, 6 weeks with that leg injury. So with the Rams and 49ers, I would imagine that there are certain secondary options they feel comfortable in, but both of these offenses right now are going to be going through it for a little bit of time. And the thing is, while it could be an opportunity for certain players to step up in the system, I think the main struggle here is, well, it's early in the season, and you're already seemingly behind the 8 ball. And both of these teams projected and thought that they would be in the playoffs. As Andre said, man, I told myself to sell Kupp high after week 1. He's made of glass. Yeah, man. Cooper Kupp, when he's on the field, one of the best in the league. Definitely someone who I would recommend as a wide receiver 1 when he's healthy. But it's just a matter of, he's just not, a player who can consistently prove that he can stay on the field for long periods of time, man. It's just a matter of the fact. It's just the way the cookie crumbles sometimes, especially in fantasy when you're trying your best to have good players. You're trying your best to have high-end players and balance them out with some guys that are serviceable. But now all the serviceable guys are becoming more coveted because of the injuries to your high-end guys. So it's just a weird situation. But in terms of contingency plans, if, Tutu Atwell, DeMarcus Robinson, Colby Parkinson, Brandon Ayuk, Jawan Jennings prove themselves, then that's even better for the wide receiver landscape. Because when all of these guys come back, you now know that even though all the wide receivers who are performing in their stead are going to fall in the pecking order, you now know they can add some balance to your team once all your high-end guys are healthy. So it's an interesting dichotomy to think about right now. But that's the unfortunate nature of, early season injuries. You can't necessarily plan for them, and they just hit you like a ton of bricks when they come. As Andre says, can I ask him trade questions? As always, my man, feel free to ask any trade questions you wish for certain. Not sure how much time I have left. You can have a little bit of time. We can go through some more injuries, but if you have any trade questions, anyone watching right now, if you have any trade questions, I would love to take them. But let's continue for the time being until Andre gets me his questions with some injuries right now. Let's talk about Isaiah Pacheco, shall we? Because Isaiah Pacheco's one's a little bit weird because I'm not necessarily that concerned with the Chiefs' overall outlook as an offense because of his injury. But it is one that a lot of fantasy football managers are kind of reeling off because Isaiah Pacheco was one of those guys who was technically between being a high-end guy as Andre gets, I'm thinking of moving Garrett Wilson for Amon-Ra St. Brown. Well, that one hits home because both of them are on my fantasy squad. So this is an interesting question for me because it's calling into question 2 of my players who I drafted very high in my drafts that I had a lot of high hopes for, but haven't necessarily been performing very well so far. But in terms of, trading one for the other, if you're moving for Amon-Ra, I think that's a smarter choice in the long run. And after last night's performance, you might think, well, as Hunter18 enters the chat, thank you for being here, Hunter. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section. I will get to them. But concerning this trade, I think I would take it at this current juncture in time. As weird as it sounds considering what the Lions' offense is right now and how Jared Goff's been performing, I just think that Amon-Ra St. Brown is worthy of all the plaudits. I think that he will eventually find his footing. The Rams will continue to try to get him the football. As Hunter, I will get to your trade offer between Brian Thomas or start between Brian Thomas or Cam Akers eventually. But in terms of this Andre trade, Garrett Wilson for Amon-Ra, I would accept it. I love Garrett Wilson a lot, but right now it seems to me like Aaron Rodgers is comfortable spreading the ball around as a passer right now. And then going to Hunter's question, as Andre asked another one. Going to Hunter's question real quickly, I think Brian Thomas could be an interesting start. I think that in terms of this offense going forward, the Jags will try and get Brian Thomas more incorporated. And if he is proving to be more vertical in this offense, I think that, Trevor Lawrence's deep ball is one of the most underrated ones in the league. And so they can get a lot of verticality in the offense, get a lot of targets. Whereas Cam Akers, I don't really like him as a running back anymore. Kind of lost a lot of value over the years. So I would start Brian Thomas in a PPR league. And the final question, Andre, I'm going to offer Wilson and Ridley for Amon-Ra and maybe B-Rob, who was on his bench. Is that a strong enough offer? I think that Wilson and Ridley for Amon-Ra, and I believe you're talking about Bijan Robinson on his bench. I think that is a fantastic trade, and it could be a fleece. It's a bit risky one because he might think that Wilson and Ridley aren't necessarily the best return possible for this trade. But in terms of, like-for-like players, Garrett Wilson and Amon-Ra are very similar in terms of how I view them in terms of fantasy implications. And then Calvin really isn't that bad. It's just that his quarterback is bad. So I think that it adds a lot of value, and it's a pretty even trade. So I think that would be a strong enough offer. And it's a 2-for-2, so you're not necessarily dinging a carrot for him either by offering him 3, and you're not playing low ball. It's Brian Robinson, Andre says. I think that's still a good offer. I like Brian Robinson a lot. For the Commanders, going to get a lot of touches there in the run game. Really like him. I think he's going to supplant Austin Eckler as the starting running back in that system. So I really like that outcome. So thank you guys for your comments. I appreciate it, but I do want to get to some more injuries before we go to our next segment really quickly here. Pacheco, fractured fibula, out 6 weeks. Don't buy anyone in the Chiefs backfield. Yes, they did sign Kareem Hunt, the practice squad. Could be interesting value, but again, it's between Ryan Steele and him. As Andre said, I really regret trading Cook and Rice for Pacheco and Olave. I'm so mad thinking about it. Yeah, Cook and Rice for Pacheco and Olave. It wasn't the best of trades, but at least, maybe Olave, even though he's fallen in the pecking order, will still add value for the New Orleans Saints. But Pacheco one was, the one. As he says, I also want to try and get Rice back with a 2-for-1 trade. That would be something that could be an interesting one looking forward. But the final couple injuries I want to get before we have to head to break here. A.J. Brown as well. A.J. Brown pretending to miss a lot more time than expected. Kind of an unfortunate injury because I believe he sustained it pre-game, that hamstring injury. Couldn't miss a couple of weeks, though, in that offense. So look out for that. But without further ado, we have to go to a quick break here. And our final segment of the day and the week will be about college fantasy football games, and most importantly, the implications that come with them. We'll be right back to close the show on the GSMC Fantasy Sports Podcast with that segment.